Something must have gone terribly wrong with the NFL schedule makers because we're apparently getting a good Thursday night game. That just doesn't sound right, but apparently it is the case, as Baltimore will be taking on Cincinnati, and this is really a fantastic matchup. I think it'll be closer than some people are suggesting, and the biggest reason I believe that is because the biggest aspect of the game is obviously the quarterback matchup, and it's pretty darn close. You could argue that Lamar has been the best player in the league as a whole this season, but in all actuality, Joe Burrow is not far behind, if he's behind at all. He's really not being talked about in the same light because his team isn't performing as well as Jackson's team is, but it's not because of Burrow's failings, it's because the defense stinks. And that brings us to our first sort of clash with the defensive expected points added. It is very tight. They are competing for just who is going to be a little bit worse than the other team, as Baltimore is 25th in this stat and Cincinnati is 26th. That's really rough. In defensive success rate, we see a sort of massive difference, as the Ravens are 11th, which is actually good, and the Bengals remain bad at 27th. That kind of speaks to something I'm going to get into later, which is looking actually at the rosters of the teams. But just to put a pin in it now, it speaks to the team as they are constructed, where the Ravens may not be performing well, but they have a structure in place to perform well. So, yes, they're going to play well, maybe on a play-by-play basis, but they've been giving up huge plays, as evident by them having a very poor expected points added, which, if you don't know what these stats are, I have a video that breaks it down. With that said, the Bengals, a little bit more for them. They're 32nd, meaning dead last, in run defense success rate. That is very worrisome because the Ravens, they can give it to you any way you want it. They can beat you through the air. They can beat you on the ground. Derrick Henry has been an absolute monster. And Lamar Jackson, as I mentioned before, he's getting after it at a very, very high level. Probably playing better than he's ever played before, which is ridiculous to think. He's already played super high levels. So, with that said, one thing that's also important is the injury report. And there we have T. Higgins being listed as doubtful and Isaiah Likely being listed as out. Those are the two big names for the teams. There are some other injuries, of course. Those aren't just the only guys that are hurt. But those are the big names for the teams. And really, I think Likely is a big loss, but he can be sort of minimized by a good Mark Andrews game and the addition of Deontay Johnson. Even though Johnson is a receiver and Likely is a tight end, Johnson can get the targets that Likely was going to get. So there's going to be something there for the Ravens, even in the absence of Likely. If Higgins doesn't play, that's really massive. Jamar Chase is going to then be doubled on basically every play. And yes, Chase is a fantastic receiver that is more than capable of still having some success in that scenario. He's obviously going to be less effective, though, with 2 guys on him than he would be with just 1. So, as I mentioned before, with the construction of the defenses, the Bengals are a bit different than the Ravens, even though they both have been performing poorly on defense. With the Bengals, there's only about 4 players, I would say, 4 starters, that is, on defense that are above average for them. And when I say above average, I mean definitively above average, not like, they're the 40th player and there's 90 guys at that position. No, I mean, they're well above average. That is not enough, especially because it's not like the rest of their team defensively is full of average players that you don't need to make up for. They're full of below average players that are going to be able to be targeted. And that is something that is really worrisome, again, against the Ravens. They're going to maximize your weaknesses for their gain. And it's just going to become a problem. And I don't see that quite as much for the Bengals. I admit that the Ravens defense has not been good this year, but it has the foundation still to be very good. Last year, they were arguably the best defense in the league, and they lost the linebacker to the Steelers. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. But additionally, they lost Mike McDonald, their defensive coordinator. That's about it. And they really have most... Jadeveon Clowney, another one. I should not have taken as long to mention him as I did. Those are the big guys they lost. But that's not enough to make you go from being one of the best defenses in the league to one of the worst. They still have a lot of talent. I would say, if you look at it honestly, you can say that there's about 8 defensive starters for the Ravens that are above average. It's their entire front 7, basically. And then Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, obviously, Ardarius Washington has played really well. Kyle Williams was the defensive tackle for the Bills. Marcus Williams, as he is more commonly known for the Ravens, is not playing very well, but that's the main guy that's not playing super strongly for them in their defensive back room. They also don't have great play from Brandon Stevens, but he's an alright player. I wouldn't say that he's awful. So what does all that mean? It means that I trust the Ravens defense to eventually figure it out. I don't think the Bengals are going to. So with that said, I do definitely lean the Ravens here. If I had to predict a score for this game, I would say the Ravens 31 and the Bengals 24. I think it is going to be rather high scoring, which is in part because the defenses still aren't great and it's hard to bank on them playing really well. But it's also just, these really are good offenses. The Ravens, they might be the best offense in the league. The Bengals, they're not far behind. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think this is going to be a great game, though, more than anything. And I do think the Ravens are going to win. Those are my thoughts on the game. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section below. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more content.